The food delivery service Munchery is undergoing some big changes that they announced today. Joining us to talk about the difficult on-demand food business is Eric Newcomer from Bloomberg Technology. How's it going, Eric?
Great. How are you doing?
Awesome. It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. So first of all, how does Munchery differ from other food delivery services? There's all different types of food delivery services online right now. Munchery's a little bit different. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, there are a ton of different approaches. Munchery takes we're going to cook it in our kitchens, we're going to package it that night, and then we're going to deliver it to you. Some of it prearranged and then some of it on demand. But the key difference is that they're dealing with the cooking and the delivery. I mean, if you think about Postmates, DoorDash, Uber Eats, those services are mostly delivering restaurant food.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in this case, is it safe to kind of think of this as a little bit as like it's an internet-enabled restaurant? I mean, they're really just cooking their own food and delivering it, based on orders they're getting through the restaurant. So instead of sitting at a table, you're sitting at your cubicle or whatever, and you're ordering off their menu, and they're just delivering it to you based on food they make. Kind of the same thing?
Right. And I think that was sort of a big part of the challenge with Munchery. It just, it's a sort of tech-run, finance-run company that ultimately is going to have to win over customers based on the quality of its food and managing its food. And, I think it's the classic sort of tech thinks it can solve everything and sort of jumps into a space, and then, we see what happens.
Yeah. So you point out in the article there's some food waste. There's a big food waste problem. And I mean, I used to work in the restaurant industry for years. I know food waste is just kind of part of the game that you play when you're in the restaurant industry. But I mean, your sources say that it was a considerable amount. How does a company like this predict and scale appropriately to meet that?
Yeah, I mean, this goes far beyond sort of what's standard for a restaurant. I had sort of firsthand data that showed that they overproduced more than 650,000 meals than they needed over a 22-month period. It was 16% of the meals they made. And I talked to some restaurant experts, and sort of the acceptable range is more around 4 to 10%. So this was definitely atypical. And I was looking at the San Francisco kitchen specifically, and for the most part, I mean, their revenue was fairly consistent. So it's not like things were, changing super dramatically that they didn't sort of understand demand. I think there were issues around, we want to have a sort of a wide set of menu options, so we can't predict demand well on a particular meal. We're also sort of taking on a lot of marketing campaigns. So we're always hopeful, like many startups, always hopeful that growth is right around the corner. And I think that was part of the problem here.
Sure.
Well, so you said that they have more food waste than regular restaurants. I mean, if they're an internet company, a data company, why didn't they have the data to figure out how to reduce food waste? Like, say like Uber. I mean, that's the promise of Uber, right? That they're transforming transportation and they know how many riders they need where. Was Munchery not doing that at all?
Yeah, I think it's, still somewhat of a mystery why they couldn't or didn't care to sort of crack down on this. I think there was a lot of focus on sort of the unit economics in the sense of bringing down the food cost per meal, but there was much less emphasis on figuring out, what are our actual costs today? And I think a lot of it was around the hope that soon that they would be bigger. So it's like, let's build the processes for a bigger business and grow into that. And the company just has had trouble getting the traction where it keeps enough of its customers that it makes sense to produce as much food as it can. So it was really focused on sort of unit economics in the sense, if you exclude sort of their total cost, but not as focused on reducing their total food cost, which I think was bewildering to me, certainly, and to a lot of the former employees that I talked to.
How much of this, you mentioned marketing, and I mean, I have to imagine that's a part of it, right? Like if they're aggressive at their marketing strategy, but it's an ineffective marketing strategy, then they've overproduced to meet this demand that just isn't there. How did that take place?
Yeah, the marketing, I think it's something we have to watch on all of these startups. I mean, they were spending, even in a slide deck I saw, like $450,000, and I think it was Q3 2014, and like $300,000 of it was Facebook ads. And, this is a company that could drop several $100,000 in a month just flyering a neighborhood. They would just go out and try to acquire customers, and especially, some of my sources said ahead of the fundraising round. So they were using marketing, but didn't seem to be able to keep the customers. Obviously, that becomes a problem. You can get a customer if you offer them, $20 off their first purchase, but then do they come back, for the next meal that they have to pay full price for?
Yeah, it's like the Living Social / Groupon flaw. It's
Yeah,
like,
I've
great,
seen
you
that
got
one.
this customer, but it's not worth anything to you anymore.
So this isn't really a technical question unless you, or a technology question, unless you consider the effect of these startups, these tech startups on San Francisco as a city. But did they, do you know if they donated the food or if they just threw it away? Do you have any idea what they did with all of that food waste?
Yeah, Munchery says they donate all the food. And the former employees I spoke with definitely say they donate some of the food. Those former employees say Munchery also throws some of the food away. It's hard to trace, an exact line of custody from the wasted food to where it goes. There are a couple charities in play. Some of the charities that Munchery has mentioned donating to don't even serve as much food as Munchery wastes. But, I can't say definitively what percentage gets thrown away. All I can say is that, my sources said some of it gets thrown away, some of it gets donated. The company says all of it gets donated, but it's sort of an open question, how, what percentage of those meals are getting to the homeless or other people.
Right.
Because that's something that really frustrates me, because I think that a lot of people think, there's this general idea that you can't donate food from restaurants, and that's not true. Like, right. It's because you're afraid of getting sued. That's the thing. Well, like, I can't donate this food because I might get sued if someone gets sick. But like, there was a law passed in 1996. Bill Clinton posted, it was the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Act. So restaurants can, in good faith, donate the food, and if someone gets sick, they can't be blamed or sued for it. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
They should do that better.
That's right.
So obviously today there was also news of a new CEO at Munchery. That's must be a reaction to all these troubles. What do we know about the new CEO's vision for kind of like how to move the company a different direction?
Yeah, I think he was the former CEO of Simply Hired. It's James, and I'm going to get the last name wrong, so I'm going to avoid it. But I think he's sort of a turnaround guy. Definitely a technical co-founder, which I got some texts of surprise from some of the former people there, because I think their question has been, isn't this a food company? Like, doesn't it need more of a food focus? But I think he certainly had some success selling small tech startups to some of the bigger technology companies. So I would imagine that might be the hope for some of the investors. But yeah, so total regime change. The founding CEO is going to sort of be, I think, the head of strategy, but stepping aside as CEO.
James Barraker, I believe.
Thanks.
Yes, no problem. So I mean, one thing that I've seen time and time again, and I mean, dating back as far as like the early 2000s, late 1999 time period in Silicon Valley, is that food and the internet have such a complicated history when it comes to like delivery and all that kind of stuff. Why does it continue to be so challenging? Is it that Silicon Valley doesn't understand food? Like they think, well, we've got the money, we've got the technical smarts, this should be easy, but in fact, they're two completely different industries?
It's mind-boggling to me, because I mean, this is a space that, certainly when I first started seeing these companies crop up, I was like, we've been here before with Webvan and other sort of on-demand food delivery companies. So it was surprising. I think there's certainly a herd mentality to it. I mean, if you look at 2015 food investing, there was like $4 billion invested. And that's compared to like 700 million, if I have my numbers right, in 2013. So like very steep jump in food investment internationally. And I think there's a level of, okay, this space has been legitimized by a few smart investors making bets in the space. We need to have our food delivery bet as well. And then everyone's sort of trying to find their own strategy. And, it's possible that none of them sort of find an effective business model. Mm-hmm. Now, I wouldn't go that far. I think there, still could be some successful food delivery companies, but, it might very well be Uber and not a totally new company that sort of a separate pool of investors are going to land on.
And they already have some sort of already working infrastructure, that, or some sort of support in other ways. Yeah. Eric, it's a pleasure getting you on. Thanks so much for joining us today. Eric Newcomer with Bloomberg Tech. Where do you want people to find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Eric Newcomer. If you go to my profile there, you can follow our new technology newsletter called Fully Charged. So that's probably the best place to hear from me every week.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a good night.